Well, thank you all for being here tonight. One of the topics that we're going to talk to you about this evening is it could happen to you. As you may have heard in the news and on social media, opiates are plaguing our community nationwide. You've probably heard about some news stories about parents overdosing in the front seats of their vehicle and children being in the back seat while the parents are unresponsive, and people recording things like that. And you might think when you hear those types of things that simply doesn't happen in our community, and so we shouldn't really be worried about it. But we're here to tell you today that it does. It's happening all across North Dakota, and whether you realize it or not, it's happening in your community too. So, a little bit about us. My name is Dawn Dietz. I'm a Special Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Bismarck office for the District of North Dakota. I have been prosecuting for about 7.5 to 8 years, and my primary portfolio is drug trafficking organizations. With me today is Sergeant Mike Bolme with the Bismarck Police Department. He's been involved in the investigation of narcotics for over a decade now, so he really is a wealth of knowledge. So, the slideshow we're showing you today is the same slideshow that the students saw earlier today. So our first slide for them was, what do these individuals have in common? The first individual is Lil Wayne. He is a rapper. The second individual is Eminem, another rapper. Machine Gun Kelly, another rapper. Prince, hopefully some of you know that one. And the last individual, Heath Ledger. And we asked the students, what do all of these individuals have in common? Opiates. Every single one of these individuals has a struggle with opiates. Lil Wayne struggles with codeine. Machine Gun Kelly openly discusses his addiction to heroin. He's originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and that's one of the worst places that the opiate epidemic is reaching right now. Eminem struggles with issues with prescription pills. Prince died of a prescription pill overdose. And finally, Heath Ledger, same, lost to a prescription drug overdose.
So this afternoon with the high school, I always start off presentations at schools with the marshmallow test. Has anybody seen the marshmallow test before? Okay. You know it's about willpower and self-control.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another, so then you'll have to. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. I'm gonna go do something, and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. It smells really good.
clean, and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did? You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So the plate is giving you another one? Like, I ain't gonna both.
So when I show this video to kids, I always make them ask themselves, which kid are you? We've all been there, and we're still there with some things, most of us. It's always IT stuff that gets me. Okay, the marshmallow test is a test of willpower and self-control. And studies later showed the children who waited for that second marshmallow tended to fare better in life. There's rewards for having willpower, right? We know that as adults. Drug abuse, most drug abuse is about that instant gratification. When people try meth for the first time, they want that high, and that's what they're going for, that instant gratification. They're throwing aside the consequences that we all know come later. The benefits of resisting drug abuse are obvious. Here's the problem, and here's why opiates and heroin are different. You may be participating in the marshmallow test, and you don't even know it. Today we're going to talk about the links between long-term pain management, prescription pain medications, addiction, and heroin, because they're all related and they're all linked. When you think back to the daily pain that your grandparents and great-grandparents lived with, because of the hard physical labor they went through, they just learned to kind of live with it. We live in a society now that we feel we don't have to live with that pain, and we really don't, but there's consequences for that. When we talk today about opioids and opiates, we're using that in a general term. And they're opium-like compound that bind to one or more opioid receptors in your body. What they're really, really good at is treating that pain. That's what they're really good at. But there's side effects to that. And when we talk about opioids, we're talking about your oxycodones, your hydrocodones, fentanyl, the prescription painkillers. They've been used for thousands of years. Most people don't know this, but we first started using morphine in the Civil War. You know, you watch old westerns where they're trying to use whiskey to dull the pain before they dig an arrow out of somebody's chest or hack a limb off. Why don't we use alcohol for that? Nowadays, you don't go to the dentist's office and he gives you a shot of whiskey before he pulls that tooth, right? It's because alcohol is somewhat good at it. If you've ever tried to fight somebody coming out of a bar, you know that. They've got a high pain tolerance because of the alcohol. But the opioids are sensational at it. And that's when they first started using it with the wounds they were seeing in the Civil War. This still continues today. The VA is we are seeing this as a society. The VA is seeing even more of it because it makes sense that disabled vets have need of long-term medication, right? But this is something that our veterans are experiencing at an even higher level than the rest of society because of that need.
Now, I just want to give you a couple of statistics that are available to you. If you go to preventnd.gov, this is where I got all these statistics, and there are two separate studies that you're going to see. According to Substance Abuse ND, it spoke with youth throughout the state and asked those students who has taken a prescription drug without a doctor's prescription. So who's misabused a prescription opiate? And it broke it down by region. And overall, North Dakota is at 14.7%, but where your region falls is the Lake region, and it's 16.2%. Now, in a separate study, and this study was conducted by a Wisconsin university, and this was a self-reporting study. It asked students in each of the various jurisdictions to self-report on what they thought about themselves or others around them. So the students were asked, amongst you and other people in your school around your age range, how many have used prescription opiates? How many have misused it? Again, focusing on your region, 100% reported that they thought that themselves or people of their age had misused it monthly. When asked about frequency of usage in the past 30 days for themselves or other students around their age, your region, Region 3, 100% in the last 1 to 2 days. So when these youth are asked to reflect upon themselves and others in their age group, they thought in this self-reporting study that everyone around them had misused it within the last 1 to 2 days. Now, what's most terrifying about this is these students were asked, how much do you think people risk harm when doing this? Well, again, Region 3, 90% thought that there was a moderate or great risk in abusing and misusing prescription opiates. When asked during the past 30 days, on how many days do you think most people your age use prescription drugs to get high or to use them without a prescription? Only less than 15% reported never, 0 days. So 85% are reporting misuse without a prescription.
So you look at these two graphs. This is a number, these are national statistics. The one on your left here is the number of prescriptions for opioid painkillers written nationwide. And the one on your right is national overdose deaths. There's a reason those graphs are similar. Now I think we're getting, because of awareness, I think we're getting a little bit better, but there's a reason those graphs correspond. What opioids do and why they're so fantastic at treating pain is they bind to specific opioid receptors in your nervous system, particularly in the brain. They also stimulate the release of dopamine, which was what gets you high. It causes that euphoria. You guys have all heard of Narcan, correct? What Narcan is used for is it blocks the effects of opioids. It blocks those opioids from attaching to the opioid receptors. So if you have opioids in your system, they're going to stick to these opioid receptors and either give you the pain relief or the high or both at times if you're abusing them. What the Narcan does is it kicks off those opioids from the receptors and essentially blocks them. Here's the problem though. If you administer Narcan to somebody, the Narcan has less of a half-life than many of the opioids, which means those opioids stay in your system longer than the Narcan. So the minute that the Narcan is done in your system, those opioids that are still floating around in there attach right back to those receptors, and you have a potential for going right back into that overdose. So what I tell people is, if you bring a loved one out of an overdose, and Narcan's kind of we can't keep it on the shelves in Bismarck. I know Fargo's the same way. I'm sure the larger cities are all in the same boat. If you bring somebody back from an opioid overdose using Narcan, you're not done yet. You have to get them to a hospital right away. We, as a police department, we have a policy now where we don't take no for an answer if we go to an overdose. Because what good does that do if we show up, use the Narcan, bring somebody out, and then leave, and 5 minutes later, they're dead again. That doesn't do anybody any good. And there's liability there for us also. So we don't take no for an answer. Either you're gonna go to the hospital, you're not gonna get charged with anything, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, but you're going to the hospital because you may not be done with that ride yet. And that's just because of the half-life.
A little group participation here. I want to ask you, which one do you think looks like the addict? On the screen you see two young ladies. Raise your hand if you think Stephanie looks like she's the addict. Okay, raise your hand if you think Ashley looks like she's the addict. Who doesn't think either are addicts? Both. Trick question, it's both. And the reason why I like to use this picture is because both of these young ladies look like they have normal lives. They look like the girl that could live down the street. They look like they could be your daughter's best friend. And these two young ladies are featured in a documentary put on by HBO, and it's called Warning, This Drug May Kill You. So these two young ladies are sisters. Their names are Stephanie and Ashley Gay. Stephanie was about 14 years old when she suffered from kidney stones. A lot of pain in kidney stones, and so her mother took her to the doctor, and in order to help with the pain of the kidney stones, she was prescribed oxycodone. And she continued to take the oxycodone to help with the pain, and after a while she would get over the kidney stones, but she started to feel the triggers, the addiction of the opiates. So she would fake injuries, fake illness, fake pain to get more pills. Well, Ashley was her best friend and her sister, and she was curious. So she asked her sister if she could try some of those pills, and her sister provided them to her. And unfortunately, they both became addicted to opiates. And there came to be a point when Stephanie was cut off, which meant Ashley was cut off. They were addicted, so where did they go to get their fix? They went to the streets. And when they couldn't find prescription pills on the streets, they turned to heroin and became IV drug users. Now, I'd like to tell you that both of these girls are living happy, wonderful lives, but they're not. Ashley died of an opiate overdose. And while Stephanie continued to struggle with her addiction, she had periods of sobriety, include having a child. But you'll see in that documentary, if you have the time to watch it, is her daughter wasn't enough to keep her clean. She continued to relapse. And there's a point in that documentary where you'll see Stephanie's mother teaching Stephanie's 6-year-old daughter how to administer Narcan if she comes upon her mother during an overdose. The thing that I love most about that particular documentary is the other individuals who are featured in it. There is a mother out of Orange County, looks like she should be on the Real Housewives type of series, and she ends up dying from a prescription drug overdose. And her children are the one who find her. So this addiction doesn't have a demographic. It really can happen to anyone. And again, if you have the ability to watch any of these documentaries, the one that features these two young ladies is called Warning, This Drug May Kill You. And you can find it on YouTube. And the other one is called Chasing the Dragon, and that's put together by the FBI and DEA.
So this case study is out of a real, back when I actually got to investigate cases and not just be an administrator, I had cases of regular people acting out because of their addictions, and this is one of those cases. And this is really why it could happen to you. Say you get in a motor vehicle accident, and that's going to lead to a need for long-term pain management. That's not unusual nowadays. When you go to your pain management doctor, you're prescribed hydromorphone for that pain. This is an actual prescription off of somebody who I thought was initially, I had a whole wing full of hospital staff that was my suspects, because there's like 5 or 6 of them that had access to the prescription medication. One of the great tools we have as investigators is we can pull up people's prescription histories, and this is exactly what I'm looking for. So this person had been prescribed 112 hydromorphone pills per month for over 3 years. That's 4 hydromorphone pills per day. That's not a real uncommon prescription nowadays. So this person, in the course of a little over 3 years, had been prescribed 4,032 doses of synthetic opium. So when I see a prescription like that, I have to ask myself, how is that person not supposed to get addicted? If you take 4,000 doses of anything, addicting, you're going to get addicted. Whether it's over 3.5 years or it doesn't matter. So those kind of prescription histories always kind of set off alarm bells for me. Not only are you going to become addicted, but you're going to build up a tolerance to that substance to where what you were initially prescribed, after that long a period, it's not going to do it for you anymore. When I explain tolerance, the best way to explain tolerance is, who here drinks coffee? Most of us, right? I didn't start drinking coffee until about 9 years ago when I made it up into investigations. I was just trying to fit in with the other investigators. So when I think of when I first started drinking coffee, I'd have a cup or two and you get that little jittery, little shaky thing that we all used to get before we build up a tolerance. I can't imagine how much coffee I'd have to drink now to get that little shaky, stimulant feeling. That's tolerance. Your body does the same thing with the opioids. So not only are you have a very high potential for dealing with the addiction, but you're dealing with the tolerance to where it's not cutting through that pain anymore. It's not doing it. So now you have to supplement it. So your options are doing illegal street-level drug deals for extra meds or asking for help. But what happens if you ask for help? What could happen if you ask for help? You might get cut off completely. And most people, under those kind of circumstances, can't handle that because there really is a legitimate need for that long-term pain management. There's also worries about the stigma behind admitting you may have a problem with these things. But we need to get over that as a society because this could be any one of us, including us. So what we're seeing now, and that case was a good example of professionals acting out. I'm talking about hospital social workers, hospital nurses, nursing home nurses, things like that. I've worked those kind of cases. Those are people that work very, very hard to get where they're at. Do we have any nurses in here tonight? How hard did you work for your career, right? Pretty hard? Well, I think so. You're not agreeing with me, but yeah, you work very hard for your career. So for these kind of people to have to act out and steal from the very people that they are supposed to be treating tells you how bad this is, because that's about the last thing they would ever dream of doing. The other thing they're doing is street-level drug deals for prescription meds. Because heroin acts on the same cell receptors, it can be substituted for those prescription meds. Your body really doesn't know the difference if you take hydrocodone not as prescribed as if you take a dose of heroin. Your body reacts the same way to it. Sometimes in the bigger cities, heroin is cheaper and more readily accessible to addicts. When we talk about heroin, a dosage unit of heroin is 1/10 of a gram, what they call a point. A point of heroin is a dosage unit. If you think of a sugar packet, that's a gram of sugar. So 1/10 of that would be the dosage unit that you're going to need every day if you're taking heroin. One of the problems is you can go to Detroit and Chicago and you can pick up a point of heroin for $10 to $20. We can only speak for Bismarck, but in Bismarck you can get a point is going to cost you between $40 to $60. So you can see it pays to bring it here. It pays for those people to come from Chicago and Detroit and bring it here. Some of those more high-powered painkillers are going to cost you $60 a pill. So if you can get a $40 point of heroin, sometimes that's cheaper. And unfortunately, where we're from, it's getting to be more readily accessible, way more than it used to be. The danger to heroin, other than just in itself being dangerous, is oftentimes it's laced with other more dangerous substances like fentanyl, which we've seen, Fargo's seen, Grand Forks has seen. Fentanyl is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, which is a very potent painkiller. So why is it so hard to kick? When we talk about any of these substances, methamphetamine, marijuana, they all have a component of mental addiction. You think of our success rates for treating methamphetamine addicts, it's not very high. It's somewhere around 10%. So you're dealing with a pretty high barrier to get over just with the mental addiction. But with the opiates and the heroin, you are also looking at a very, very powerful physical addiction. So you already have two huge strikes against you. A heroin addict cannot physically function without their daily fix. They have to have that daily fix. The best way I've had it explained to me is that everybody here has had the flu, right? At some point or another. Was that a pleasant 12 to 24 hours that you had that flu? It's pretty horrible, right? Did you go to work when you had that flu? Probably not. Hopefully not. Your coworkers would not be not pleasant. You couldn't. You can't go to work when you have that flu. When a heroin addict doesn't get their daily fix or doesn't get their fix in, they are looking at 6 to 10 days of the worst flu they've ever had. So think of that 12 to 24 hours that you had that flu. Think of how bad that was. You didn't even want to get out of bed. So think of trying to go to work that day or take care of your kids that day or really do anything besides lay there and be in misery. That's what they're dealing with when they don't get their daily fix. And that's why it's so hard to kick.
Come down.
Yeah.
Think you need to see medical or something? No? Alright, go ahead and step in here for a quick.
I had a great life. I had a great job, great family. I was engaged when I wasn't using. And then these past 2.5, 3 years just been the worst. I've lost everything. Everything in my life. These marks here are all old. You see all these little marks right here in my hand. I mean, you can't see any veins in my arms or hands. See, these marks, all these right here, these are all old. All these ones are all new. All the way up here, on this leg, down this leg here, all my whole legs, everything. Those are the new ones. It's pretty bad addiction. I don't even get high anymore. I just do it so I can feel normal. I'm starting to get withdrawals and it's starting to take effect now since I haven't used in almost 12 hours. You start getting cold, hot. You start sneezing a lot, nose starts running, vomiting, you can't get comfortable. Imagine being physically sick with the flu, just where you don't want to move. Your bones ache, your body aches, your stomach hurts. You just feel like throwing up, you just drained of everything physically. And that's what I'm gonna start going through. I'm scared, let's be honest.
One of the things we think about as somebody who, you know, honestly, part of my job is putting people in jail. So one of the things that I have to weigh out is when I'm throwing an opiate addict in jail on a Friday, that's going to be a miserable weekend for them in jail. It's getting better because now on Bismarck, if you're in the methadone clinic, they can bring you methadone in the jail to kind of get you through that weekend. But before, I brought people to jail crying, not because they're scared of me or the consequences later, but because they know they're facing what that guy just had to face. And you heard him say, I don't even get high anymore, I just do it to feel normal. He has to have that daily fix to feel normal and to function. So why do we have a pending epidemic? We talked about the history behind it and how we now live in a society where we don't have to live with that daily pain, or we think we don't have to live with that daily pain. Most current heroin users started with prescription pain medication. I can honestly tell you in my first 4 or 5 years in narcotics, I had one heroin case, and that was some out-of-stater who came here and brought his habit with him. Now, between the heroin and the methamphetamine, they're by far the two most chased after substances for guys in my unit. More people now die from opioid overdoses than car accidents, and opioid abuse costs the U.S. $78.5 billion. When you think of lost productivity, healthcare, and CJ costs, lost productivity is you can't go to work unless you get your fix.
So let's talk a little bit more how this has actually affected North Dakota, how our overdoses have increased and proven that this is a North Dakota problem. There were 20 overdose deaths in the state of North Dakota in 2013. There was a 125% increase. In 2014, bumping us up to 43. And in 2015, 61 overdose deaths. Now, just from the time of January through April of 2016 in the Fargo-Moorhead area, just a 4-month period, 10 people dead, 40 hospitalized, and probably countless overdoses that we don't even know about. In Bismarck in 2017, so far, 22 reported overdoses. But again, there's probably dozens, if not hundreds more that we don't know about. Mike and I have heard numerous stories from addicts who've told us that they just bring themselves back. We've heard stories about, now that Narcan's available over the counter, or you can get it from the prescription counter, we've heard stories about individuals who will get together in their groups and get high together and have a designated driver. So they'll have one person who's going to stay sober while everybody else gets high and watches to make sure nobody overdoses. And that one person is ready to administer Narcan for anybody who overdoses.
So when you look at this stat, over a 4-month period, you have 10 deaths and 40 people. To someone in our profession, that tells us there's a bad batch. There's a bad batch of heroin that got mixed with something that's killing people. And you said that's fentanyl in that batch.
That one was carfentanil.
Carfentanil, I'm sorry. That's why we do what we do. Because every shipment of this that we can intercept may save 10 people, may save 50 people. Who knows? Every one that gets through us has a potential of having an effect like that. That's why we do what we do. So what are you looking at when you're looking for somebody under the influence of the opioids? You're looking at droopy eyelids, drowsiness, dry mouth or bruxism. They'll do a lot of grinding of the teeth. They also do that under the influence of methamphetamine, so that's not a be-all, tell-all for the substance. You're looking at nausea that we talked about earlier, track marks. Dawn and I both know a local girl in Bismarck who we've been dealing with for years. Super nice, I say girl, she's in her 20s, but super nice woman. But a couple years ago, I remember seeing her, she was 7 months pregnant and had track marks all up and down both arms. Well, if you run out of places to shoot up, you saw the guy in the video, if you run out of places to shoot up in your arms, you're shooting up other places up to and including straight into your jugular. They get pretty desperate. Constricted pupils, the opioids are the only thing that's going to cause tiny pinpoint pupils. And sometimes if I'm not sure, I'll gaze longingly into my partner's eyes just to compare pupils with whoever I'm dealing with. I don't do that, I'm just kidding. But that's a good way to tell. If they're under the influence of methamphetamine, they're going to have big dishpan pupils, like you look at them like, what is going on there? That's methamphetamine. With the opiates, tiny pinpoint pupils. And then you're also looking at somebody who is what we call on the nod. They're basically falling asleep, standing up.
never seem to fall.
So I don't want to live in a city where that's normal. I mean, you saw people passing him by like it's just another day in Baltimore, I guess. But those are the signs and symptoms and what you're looking for somebody under the influence of opiates or heroin. When we talk about heroin or prescription medication paraphernalia, any single way you can think of ingesting this stuff or getting it into your body, they will try. Locally, most of our heroin addicts are what they call slammers, or they're shooting up with syringes. When you take your prescription medication, when you take your hydrocodone as prescribed, you're taking it in pill form and you're ingesting it orally. There's a time release portion built into that pill to where you're getting the pain relief, but you're not getting the high from it. That's why those pills work so great. When you crush those pills up and shoot them into your arm with a syringe, you're getting around that time release portion. It's going straight into your blood, straight into your brain. That's why you get high when you do it that way. That's why when we talk about, when we go into houses and we're looking for paraphernalia, you're going to see syringes. I'll talk about it a little bit. You're going to see spoons with burn marks on them. You're going to see spoons. Oops, does anybody know what that is? On the spoon? Anybody guess? No guesses? It's not residue. That's actually a cotton swab. That cotton swab is acting as a filter. You don't want pill chunks floating around in your vein, right? Because no matter how hard you crush those pills up, you're not going to, it's hard to get that chunks out of there. So they're using that cotton swab as a filter for it. But really, we've seen them smoking or a minority of them have smoked heroin, but mostly it's IV drug users.
You still might be thinking that this doesn't really happen here. And one of the other things we want to get across is things are not always as they appear. Did anybody read about in the media what exactly happened with Prince when he died? I think it was pretty obvious that it came out that it was an opiate overdose, but his toxicology results yielded that there was fentanyl in his system. And when Prince's home was searched, there were fentanyl-laced prescription opiates. Again, you might be thinking that just happens in big cities, but you're wrong. It's on its way here. In fact, it already is here. Up on the screen, you'll see a prescription pill bottle with a bunch of little blue pills in it. Looks like a legitimate prescription pill bottle, right? And this is an active case that I'm prosecuting right now. Closer look at those pills, you can see that it has some markings. On one side, it's a V. On the other side, it's a 4812. Well, if you go to drugs.com, it will tell you that a pill with those markings is oxycodone hydrochloride. Looks legit, right? Well, we sent those pills to the North Dakota State Crime Lab, and those pills are not oxycodone hydrochloride. They are a mix of tramadol, which is just a pain reliever, heroin, and U-47-700. Well, that's a new one we haven't talked about yet. Well, what is U-47-700? Well, remember how we said heroin is about 3 or 4 times more potent than morphine? U-47-700 is illegally manufactured in labs overseas. And you'll see here that it's far more potent than morphine, possibly 7 to 8 times more potent, but we really can't be sure. And why can't we be sure? Because it's illegally made. And that's where we run into the problems with bad batches. There's no FDA process, no process to make sure that things are being made in the same manner. These are people that are making this purely to make money. Now, this particular case, the individuals who were making this bought a pill press, and they were buying the U-47-700 from labs overseas and having it shipped. And this gentleman knew his U-47-700 was being intercepted by law enforcement. And he kept emailing the labs overseas saying, the cops took my drugs, you need to send me more. And they did. Now, you can't trust your drug dealers either. That seems pretty obvious, right? Well, addicts don't think that. They think, my drug dealer is my friend. They would never hurt me, right? They need to keep me alive so I can keep buying from them. Another case that I'm currently prosecuting, this little bag right here was being passed off as heroin. This was sent from California in the mail to Bismarck, North Dakota. And within this group of drug distributors, they had a couple of heroin addicts, and one of them was a young female who they would use to test the drugs on. They would test to see how good the dope was, and she would just use it every once in a while, and when they gave her this stuff, she said normally she takes about half a point to get high. She said when this stuff came in, she took a quarter of a point and overdosed. And they were passing this stuff off as heroin. So we took this stuff in a search warrant and sent it to the North Dakota State Crime Lab. And it was not heroin, it was in fact pure fentanyl. 21.75 grams of pure fentanyl. Remember, that stuff is 500 times more potent? 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine. So if we had that little bag here right now, and I threw it up into the air, and it passed all over everyone here, we would all be dead in minutes. Every single one of us.
You could be.
What?
You may be.
More than likely.
Yeah.
That's not a bet I want to take. So, North Dakota nice. North Dakota is a great place to live, right? We're all very nice people, very trusting. Sometimes too trusting, right? Think about it. Where are your prescription opiates, if there are any in your house? Probably in your bathroom. Are they locked up? Probably not. Probably just in a medicine cabinet. Is it in an easily accessible place? Is it a place where someone could grab it and you wouldn't even notice? Are there enough pills there where if somebody took a couple, would you even notice? I've heard a story of a young girl who was addicted to prescription opiates, and she told her treatment group that what she would do is she would just go to random houses, knock on the door, and she was a pretty little girl, and just say, I really have to go to the bathroom. Can I please use your bathroom? And people would let her in because she looked like a normal, pretty little girl. And then she would shuffle through the medicine cabinet and take as many opiates as she could get her hands on. She was out the door. No one ever thought a second thing of her. It can happen. So just be cognizant of that when you're letting people into your home, or even your kids, or your nieces or nephews, or other family members. Where are your prescription opiates? Can someone get their hands on them? Can someone take them? And would you notice?
So here's the effects in North Dakota. Obviously, we're seeing fatal overdoses. We don't see many, meth has been a problem for a long time here. You just don't see that many fatal meth, like instant overdoses. You slam some meth and you die. You just don't see that very often. We're seeing it all the time now with the heroin and the opiates. Part of the problem there is it's so underreported, the non-fatal ones, that we don't really even have a grasp on what's going on out there. One of our problems in Bismarck and Fargo, I'm sure Grand Forks and Minot, the bigger cities, is we're getting an influx of inner city gang members. Guys from Detroit and Chicago that are coming out here and selling this stuff. We talked about how it's much, much cheaper back there. It's worth it monetarily to bring it here. It's worth it unless you get caught. The reason they're different is most of Dawn and I worked a lot of meth cases together before the heroin stuff hit. Most of those meth dealers, even when they're coming from out of state, were addicted to their own products. These heroin dealers that are coming from Detroit and Chicago, they're not addicted to their own products. So they're coming out here just purely to make money, and they're killing people. That's why they're different. We're seeing an increase in IV drug use, and we also have a growing need for treatment facilities such as methadone clinics. This is also a very dangerous time to be a narcotics investigator. My started carrying Narcan about a year ago, A big part of the problem is the fentanyls, the carfentanyls of the world, when they're in that powder form, they can become airborne and you can ingest it that way. And it takes like 2 nanograms of that stuff to be fatal. They can also be ingested through the skin. I can touch methamphetamine all day long. I don't. But I can touch methamphetamine all day long and it's not going to get absorbed through my skin. There's no danger there for me or my guys. There's a great danger if you're dealing with fentanyl or carfentanyl. It can be absorbed through your skin. So we started carrying the Narcan about a year ago. And knock on wood, we haven't had to use it yet, but we go into a lot of these environments with syringes, with powders that are out in the open air, and all it takes is somebody to bump a table and all of a sudden it's airborne. And there's a great deal of danger there. So it's kind of a scary time to be in law enforcement. So what are people like Dawn and I doing? Or anybody in the, who cares? We have methadone treatment facilities now in Minot, Bismarck, and Fargo. I know they're spinning up more of them because there's a need for more of them. Really the methadone program, most people are surprised that cops would be in favor of methadone programs, but what else are you going to do? I mean, we've talked about the physical and mental addiction. The methadone, when they do it right, and I can tell you they're doing it right in Bismarck, they couple the chemical treatment so they can get through that physical addiction part of it with the other treatment too, to get them over the mental hurdles. I'm sorry.
Can you explain how methadone works?
Yep. Was that? It basically, methadone is great. You take it as prescribed. It usually comes in a liquid. You have to, you show up at the clinic at 7 in the morning. You get your dose of liquid methadone, just a small amount of methadone. That's going to be enough because you're taking it, remember we talked about the time release portion of things? You're taking it as prescribed. It's going to block those opioid receptors for the day. You get your daily fix, and then you can go to work, and you can take care of your kids, and you can be a productive citizen while you work on your addiction. So we are huge proponents of methadone. Did I answer your question? The problem is, especially at first, and I was part of a board when they first started in Bismarck, Mandan, to kind of try to talk about bringing in a methadone clinic. There was this fear that if you build it, they will come. And my answer was, they're already here. We might as well start helping them out. My unit kind of changed the way we did things in that we used to run around and try to scoop up the street level drug dealers and try to work our way up the organizational chart. We found that we're not getting a lot of bang for our buck that way. And so we're trying to cut off the head of the snake. And now we have prosecutors who understand that philosophy too. We just get more bang for our buck that way. We are targeting drug trafficking organizations. If I can stop that guy from coming from Detroit, that's better off than chasing around a bunch of locals and getting them C felony possession charges and filling up your jails and raising your taxes and all that stuff. It's just a better way of doing things, and we get more bang for our buck that way. And honestly, we're still working a lot of hours, but it's paying off more, I guess. We also have to educate the criminal justice system. I talked to you about how these guys coming from Detroit and Chicago are different. Our judges need to know that too when they're sentencing these guys. You're just dealing with a different kind of animal. And we also have to be more out here telling you guys. I tell every presentation that I do that as narcotics investigators, we have failed you. I should be out, and as parents, I have failed you. I should be out in schools every single day teaching kids about the dangers of this stuff, because that's how you get ahead of it. But there's too few of us, not enough time, and too much to do. But that should be, the education should be a bigger part of it than it is. We also have the Good Samaritan laws. And my unit in Bismarck, we honor those Good Samaritan laws to the T, even probably more so. There's a stigma involved if your friend overdoses on heroin or opioids and you take him to the ER, what are most people worried about? Getting in trouble, right? The Good Samaritan laws basically mean you cannot be charged for reporting your friend overdosing. We would never want to discourage people from getting help. That's the spirit of that law. And we abide by not only the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. I've literally we've had cases where we know that the person who brought that addict in because they were overdosing, I've had cases where I knew that's who delivered the heroin to them. Not only did they not get charged, I took their stuff, we just disposed of it, and it was like it never happened legally. So even with the Good Samaritan laws, we're still fighting that stigma, and it's still so hard, and that's why it's so underreported. I don't know half of what goes on out there because they're just so worried about getting in trouble, even though we go to great pains to make sure they know that we honor those laws and they're not going to get in trouble.